I've been lucky to be able to speak to a bunch of great drummers on this podcast. And at ground level, what I'm digging for with everybody is, how did they get so good? Like, what is it about the psychology, their approach, their upbringing, everything else? So I thought a cool place to start would be, when you first began the drums, did it feel easy to you?
Yeah, because I started as a kid, and as a kid you don't think much, you just play and have fun, and it felt totally natural, kind of, yeah. And
since then, and I've watched a bunch of your Instagram stuff, you have a very methodical practice routine. And I can tell from watching you that you like to pinpoint something and go really, really deep on it systematically. So what do you think, when did you learn to approach practice that way, I guess would be the first question.
Okay, yeah. I don't know exactly when this actually happened. I think sometime during my studies at university, actually, because before, I wasn't a professional musician until I turned 26. So before I was just playing along music, playing in bands, but I was not really mastering something, or I was not studying something like really in deep. It was more that I even could not really read properly. So it was more like learning by ear a lot of stuff. And as I got more into this kind of reading and studying, like music sheets and notations, and it opened up a whole new thing to me. And I was able to understand also what I was playing, actually. And the combination of learning things by ear and writing it down and see it on paper, to see the options also, and then going deep, I think that kind of thing developed during my studies at university, actually, yeah.
And did it feel like you made a huge jump in your playing at that point, or did it feel like you already had a bunch of raw materials and implementing the system just helped you unlock those?
No, it was actually, I made a huge jump, like really huge, for a couple of years. It was actually like ongoing improvements at this time. And a lot of stuff was the basic stuff, you know.
This mirrors some breakthroughs I had in my 20s and early 30s as well. And I think one of the advantages to going super deep as an adult is we're maybe more aware of the context of everything and of where to situate the new things we're learning. So just for instance, for me, I felt like one of the big breakthroughs I had in my late 20s was just this idea that just because I could theoretically play a groove, like boom, check, that didn't mean that it was going to feel good, or that it was going to be in time, or that the sounds were going to be good. That all needed to come from me. I needed to be able to subdivide well. I needed to be able to play things the correct volume, everything like that. And likewise with improvisation, just because I could theoretically play a fill didn't mean it was going to come out in flow when I was trying to play a solo. So I'm curious if you have anything that comes to mind in terms of insights you picked up during your jump from before to after as a young adult.
Yeah, for me it was like a maybe the journey of I was able to play things. I did not understand what I was doing, but I could play stuff which was also like kind of a bit complex. I started off with a band. We played Dream Theater and things like not the heaviest songs of Dream Theater, but like still it's prog and a lot of odd meters and stuff. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was just following the music and learned it by ear. And what I realized after I was studying more theoretically, that this 15 years of just learning by ear was a huge thing in terms of musicality. And catching the feel of a song, of a emotion in the song. And with studying at the university, it was more like the theoretical part of it. And it kept a while, and now I'm on my way out again. But, so it's like, I don't know how I can explain that, but it's like I want to improve more in both directions, but in a balanced way. And I wouldn't say it is balanced yet. It's like on-off balanced. But yeah, studying the theory behind the music is really like, it brought me in a different direction in my playing as well. And nowadays I try to get a little bit more back in balance with the feeling and everything.
I want to back up a little bit. At what point, or was there a point after you started playing when you had an instinct that you were good at this, or you were meant to do this, or that maybe you had more of a gift or an aptitude or a desire than some other people?
Oh no, I actually don't think that I got to this point. I mean, my journey is obviously a bit different than the journey of most of the drummers you might interviewed in this podcast. Because first off, it's like my journey started really late, then it's also like the European background is different than a American background in music. And also the system, and we have a different system when it comes to learn music in school. So it's not that deep like in the US. And it's also like the options to play with other musicians, just hang out and jam, is really limited here. And it's getting more limited, by the way, unfortunately. But it's it's completely a different story. And I always think like talent and being good in something is just like a maybe 5% thing of working it really out, putting the time in and working on stuff, I think everyone who is like getting good in something, doesn't matter if it's music or another business, you have to work hard and you have to put the time in to get really, really good at what you do. And as I was starting late, there are, of course, others that are like my age and are way better. I totally see that, but I just try to focus on my own path and where I am right now and try to get better every day a little bit,
What was the hardest period? What was the period where you needed to muster the most effort?
It was actually the time where I started off studying at the university, where everyone was 10 years younger than me and really good already. And I just saw my like weaknesses everywhere. I was lacking on everything. And that was a tough time. Also, like, I was not used to study music theory and reading and all that stuff, which is not necessarily the fun part of playing music. It's you have to go down to it, but it's not the fun part. And so there were so many things at the same time where I was trying to get better. And of course, when you work on 20 things at the same time, it's not really working. So I was really, really frustrated and almost giving up again. But I didn't. So, but that was the toughest 3 years, I think, so far in my life. Yeah, like music wise.
I sense that there's a story here, because you were playing drums informally, and then in your mid-20s you had some kind of a shift that caused you to commit to go to school for music and to focus on the drums. And you must have had something that sustained you through those tough periods. So I'm curious what inspired, to the degree you're able to encapsulate it, what inspired that shift and for you to decide to jump in with both feet and just go after drums and go after music?
It was less like an inspiration source. It was more the inner voice I was following, because I always wanted to just do music, nothing else, you know. I had to do something different. You know, parents and stuff, they want to have you in a safe situation. So I had to do something different before, and then I, for some reason, stuck into this job I was working in, and but it came to my mind. It was always there, and the feeling just got stronger, and I just decided, okay, that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to just play music. And I never gave up on music. I always played in bands, in 3 or 4 bands at the same time, always. That was my biggest love, you know, music, playing drums. So
I'm starting to get more of the picture. Well, that's really inspirational, I have to say. That it's, number one, that you had the discipline to go into something other than drums initially, but that you kept playing on the side, and that love never went away. And then when the time was right, you sort of made the switch. So after you've changed paths and you're going full time into drums and music, and at the beginning it feels difficult because you're studying theory and all these things. It feels like you're juggling a million balls at the same time, and it feels like other people have a big head start. When did that shift? And when did you start to feel like, this makes sense, I'm starting to master this to some degree, like I'm getting a purchase on this? And what did that feel like?
It actually happened during, I think, like the second year in university, where I really put the time in. So I got this idea with the quintuplets and all that stuff, you know, and that really got me in focus on things I've never touched before. And that was a fun thing to do, and exploring that material. And around me, like, I got reactions around me in my the drummers around me, the musicians around me, and I was not sure if that is a good thing or a bad thing, because before it was more the bad vibes I got. But in this case, it was more like the interested vibes, like the good vibes. And and I was just like, I mean, I put the time in, definitely, for a lot of things, and especially for the quintuplets. And with that, I got in a kind of a creative writing mood. And from it just evolved, you know. It was just a natural thing. I was not pushing something in a direction because I wanted to have that happening, what happened. I mean, it was maybe just a natural instinct I was following.
That makes sense. Were there players you looked up to, like you wanted to emulate, or was it more like you were really focused inwardly on developing your own voice?
It was more that I was developing my own voice. I mean, I listened to a lot of music, and I played along to a lot of music, and of course you know some of the musicians, but I was never like making my research properly in the way of who is playing the drums on this track, who is doing this and this and this and this track. I was more enjoying the music, and I found the drummer parts in a lot of stuff. John Scofield, for example, is a thing I was like studying a lot for a while. And I did not do my research in first place who was playing the drums. I was just studying the music and the playing. And on some point I was like, this is this guy, okay. And then, you know, then the drummers got more kind of inspiration to me. But in first place, it was the music itself and the arrangements and the grooves and what happened, which I got inspired to. And I never got that deep and studied other music so deep that I was playing stuff really like 1-to-1, like making a transcription and really like playing it 1-to-1. I did that a couple of times, but it was never like a thing I enjoyed, you know. I always made my steps away from that really early on and tried to make my own things out of it. And I think that was kind of a good thing to develop an own voice. Get inspired a little bit, but not too like in a copy mode, you know?
I want to talk more about having influences versus developing our own voice, but I do want to take a quick detour to Scofield because I was a huge Scofield fan when I started broadening my horizons and listening to more jazz and fusion in my 20s. So I'm very curious, what were your favorite Scofield bands?
Definitely the Uber Jam band with Adam on the drums. Yeah, that's my favorite album because it's kind of tech also. It has like this tech vibes in it a little bit. And at that time, that was like so new to me and so inspirational. And that was like almost 20 years, I think 20 years ago. Oh my God, 15 years or something like this. Yeah, at a point where technology was not what it is now. So it's like you had to really think about how did they do it and how can I do that myself? You know, it was, really inspirational. Absolutely. The Agogo album is also nice, but it's more like traditional sound.
Yeah, I love both of those. When I was in college, it was pre-drum internet. So before YouTube was big, before Instagram was big. And one of my friends discovered the Dennis Chambers Serious Moves DVD with the Scofield band, where they were basically playing all the things from like the Blue Matter record. And that blew my mind. I was Dennis pilled for a minute, but I also really loved the jazz stuff with Bill Stewart. Yeah, just curious, like how big a part did jazz play in terms of your influences? A little off topic, but I'm curious.
Actually, not that much. I'm really like coming from the rock and pop music, and it's still there in my playing. Just yesterday, I played like 2 Skunk and Nancy albums completely the whole way through it. You know, it was just like enjoying a little bit heavier music sometimes. But it's like jazz is now a big thing in for me. Now I'm studying like a lot of jazz artists, modern jazz more than traditional jazz, but it is like the last 5-6 years I'm more into that, definitely. Almost just jazz.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So in your playing, I hear a lot of elements that I feel like are in common with jazz drummers. And it's interesting to me because I think for drummers who came up in the more recent era, a lot of jazz vocabulary has kind of been absorbed into things like fusion and prog. So just for instance, your touch on the cymbals, your ability to articulate things with your fingers on the cymbals the way a jazz drummer would, sort of like Tony Williams or Lenny White. Your use of the hi-hats, your ability to use the hi-hats and all the eights. Those are all things that I feel like, actually I was just making a video about this, but I feel like in 2000, if somebody wasn't a jazz drummer, you wouldn't hear that so much, but because jazz vocabulary and drum vocabulary has been churned up so much, it feels more like the best of every genre is kind of coming through. Another sort of side tangent here is what modern jazz artists are on your playlist currently? What are you digging? I always love to talk about this stuff.
I mean, you're in New York, right? It's like Nobody is a thing. I love all albums the whole way through. I love this band so much. But I also love Mark Juliana's music. The last album is a bit different. but those before, I really admire that. So Tigran, Hamasayan, of course, that's amazing stuff. Recently, I just stumbled into a guy, I don't know if you know him in the US, but it's Peter Elt.
Feel like it sounds familiar. Maybe I've come across it on Spotify.
Yeah, it's really interesting. He has a different albums, really traditional jazz stuff also, but he is like also doing like mixes hip hop vibes, of course, and neo soul stuff, but also prog. So, and he has an album called Drums. But it's more like that he invites different drummers from all around the globe to play, and that's really interesting music. Yeah, so that's what I recently discovered. Gosh, there are so many things on my list. I don't know where to start.
Oh, those are a few good ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And a little later on, I want to ask you about band leading, because that's something I'm fascinated by as well. But I do want to go back to the college years and this idea of balancing external influences with developing your internal voice. And you mentioned the quintuplet thing, and like that as kind of a springboard for just investing you in music and going deep on something. And I'm curious, to the degree you're able to remember, what did an average practice routine look like for you, like during those years, just in broad strokes?
Roughly, it was just like warming up. It was like kind of arrive at the rehearsal room, forget about what happened like in the hours before, just warm up with basics like stickings on a pad and like flams, rudiments and stuff. And then just like I really had to develop kind of a routine because I had some struggles to really build a routine in the beginning with no help. So you have to try different things and what is working. And nowadays it's like that I have like my topics where I know what I have to work on, and it's I have exercises to go through, but I do also a lot of improvisation around it and try to incorporate stuff which I'm working on, and try to make it fluid and bring it to my daily playing so that it just comes out when I want to have it. And but the routine is basically that I have fixed like 5 topics. It's around 5 topics, and I know what to practice with those. And I exchange my exercises when I feel, okay, it's time to move on. But I stay with the same topics for quite a while. So not moving topics too fast and coming back after touring and going back into it, that's the thing actually, which helps me to still improve, kind of.
I've talked to drummers who are very, very intuitive about what they practice. Like Chris Turner, for instance, told me it's basically like he just completely goes with his whim. Like every day he sits down, he's just like falling in love anew every single day. And then people like Stan Bicknell, who are very, very scripted and just write everything down. Where on that spectrum do you think you fall in terms of like journaling and like writing stuff down?
I think nowadays it's well balanced. I have my hand out, so I usually prepare, like each year I prepare, or each 1.5 years, it's like I update my handout. So it's a handout of 80 pages, which I just built myself out of things I got, like ideas on the drums while playing. So I write this roughly down, and at some point I make it a proper PDF, for students also to work with. And so I just like put this all together in a practice handout for myself, and it's like stuff in different directions, like my 5 topics I'm working on, and it's several exercises and stuff. But I also I can also go to the rehearsal room and just follow the flow, whatever comes to my mind, or I start off with a song and just jam along and try to do things and improvise or put a loop on and just jam, and sometimes stop and just figure out what I did, you know. But it's like on off. It's like I always come back to this handout and my topics, and then it's scripted. So I have exercises I go through to get the coordination going for specific things, you know. And so a lot of stuff is scripted, definitely, that I know I can come back and I know what to do. And I also feel then when I'm on the road that it's coming along. So when you just don't practice concretely on it and you feel when you jam, stuff is coming up. It's happening not precisely, but it's coming. And so that's the thing. What's coming out when you work a little bit more with scripted stuff, you know.
How does it feel to you being on tour and being in a context where you're performing every day or every couple of days, but your ability to practice on things other than the songs you're playing, for instance, or just a warm-up at a sound check is limited? Does that feel there's utility there and it's a good growth period, or does it just feel like you wish you could be practicing every day?
It's different. It depends because when you tour with a band, so you play your music and you play your tracks and stuff, but you still grow. You still learn so much, and you get better playing with others, and you get new ideas on stage also for the songs. If you have the freedom to improvise a lot, which I almost have on each gig I played so far. Luckily, I'm lucky to have this experience. But so it's like, yeah, you grow still by just playing on stage. But I try to keep the practice going, at least a little bit. So I usually have my practice pad for the kick and for the snare, for the hands, so that I can do some hand-foot combination things. But I'm honest, I also struggle to keep it like as a regular thing on tour. You know, sometimes you just feel tired or the schedule doesn't really allow it. And then it's also that you have to relax and chill sometimes. I learned this over the years. It's also an important part. So, yeah. But yeah, I like I said, the handout is always with me and ready to go wherever I am. So
yeah, the handout you're describing sounds like what I would call like a manifesto or something, where it's kind of this continually updated compilation of all like the deepest shit that all the insights that you've discovered. I like this a lot. I like this idea. I want to dig into a couple more specifics when it comes to practice before we talk about band leading. So one thing I've been obsessed with over the past few years is exactly as you say, taking mechanical things that I work on the drum kit and setting myself up for success with those things coming out in my playing when I'm improvising, so that there isn't a wall between stuff I work on in the practice room and then I get in a performance and just none of it comes out. And because you brought that up, I'm curious, does that happen automatically for you? If you work on mechanics, it just comes out in your playing, or was there some sort of method you needed to invent or work on in order to facilitate things you practice in the shed coming out in your improvising better?
I would say there is one step in between which is important and necessary, at least to me. So when I work on mechanics and like new things, then at some point I have to play it along with music, along with loops. So that definitely helps to get the things going and get a feeling, like create a feeling for different music styles to put it maybe in, or and get a feeling if it works in this kind of music style or not, the tempo you play it on, if it works in a tempo for a specific song or not. So to get that kind of feel for a very theoretical thing and make it also sounding good and musically. So for that, it's important to play specific things you practice on, along with loops, or try to include it to any random songs you just jam along, and then it's actually, yes, it comes out naturally then on stage. Because maybe you had a session practicing along a song which had the same tempo, and you are trained to do it in that kind of tempo, and then it's come just out in a song on stage, which is similar, or similar feeling, and usually it's like that. If I have to think about a pattern and I want to bring it out on stage, then I don't do it, because it's not the time. It's not the time to practice something. And as soon as I start off thinking, what was the pattern again? Then forget it. I don't do it.
At times I've struggled with silencing the voice that tells me I should be playing something during performance, to the extent where I'll actually practice banishing that critical voice. So I'll set aside like 10 minutes. I'm going to improvise, and it's going to be completely by instinct. Just because I think maybe the way I'm wired, I'm just so in my head that I'll tend to have like a running narrative voice along with everything I do. So it took effort to not have that when I'm playing music. Was that difficult for you, or do you feel like by virtue of you having so much early experience playing gigs that you can pretty naturally just get into a flow state when you perform?
No, I had definitely to train that. And it all, like for me, a game changer, that direction was to create the headspace to listen to the music and to the musicians on stage completely like separated from what I'm doing on the drums. So, that's a challenge to do actually when you never trained that, because usually it's like, of course you listen to your bandmates when you play, but as soon it's getting like to a fill or to a more complex part, then maybe you are more like focused on your own, on playing whatever you have to do, and you lose track of what's happening in the other instruments, And so when it comes, especially when it comes to fills, I practiced playing fills in a way that it's not licks, it's not fixed combinations I practiced once and then I play them over and over in all the songs. It's more that I love to hear what's happening in the other instruments. When they play, you feel, okay, now we're moving to the B part of the song, so everyone is playing a little bit something, and if I try to listen what's happening and try to connect with the guitar or the bass or the keyboard or whatever is happening, and make the fill fitting to the other musicians, what they play. And this is easier, of course, when you know your guys and girls around you you're playing with, their playing style. It's a bit more difficult to do when you have a session and you don't know any of the other players, then it's heavier to do. And but that is a thing which I had to train. So getting the headroom to listen at any second of the gig to everyone and what's happening on stage, and be focused on my playing. It's like a split of one half of the brain and the other half, of your body to be able to do that. But that was a big game changer. So also, especially for improvisation, so that you can follow the soloist, or that you just can bring the energy in when it's really needed, that you hear it, that you feel it, or step back and let others having space to play something. Like this initial feel, it's maybe there, but it's maybe like in the beginning, if you have not trained to do it, you reacting too late. Maybe you're just starting off with doing things like 8 bars too late because you were focused on your own for too long.
That's great. What would you say to a student or somebody who asked you at a clinic or workshop who struggles with stage fright, who in the practice room, they feel like or even playing along with recordings, they feel like they can get to that sort of place of flow where they feel like they're expressing themselves, but then in an audition situation or playing on stage, all of a sudden they feel super self-conscious. Are there any insights that you think about or reframes in terms of the psychology there? Or for you, is it mainly just reps, doing it over and over and over again?
No, actually, that's a thing I talk a lot with some of my students because the thing is, when you study music, you compare yourselves to so many other drummers, for example, so that you easily can fall in a kind of a mood where you think, I cannot do anything. I'm bad. I'm just like a crap drummer, you know? And then that stuff starts off where you think, oh gosh, I don't want to play this gig. I don't want to go on stage. And you are nervous like hell for some reason, you know, which you haven't been before. And I mean, it's all about the self-esteem, and you have to build that step by step, of course. And what I say to my students is record yourself, record the shows you play. Just ask someone to put the camera on, like the phone, and record it. And then you listen back and you see you play and you sound different as you might think you do. Because as a drummer, you always have a different feel for the gig and for your playing as someone who is listening in the audience. And you might want to play a thing and it's not coming out and you get angry about yourself, or you think, oh, that sounded crap, I was so nervous, I did not keep track. And maybe, yes, you do, but it doesn't sound like that to the audience. And for me, it was a huge help to overcome such stage fright at some point, because I knew, okay, if I suck and I play some different shit and it's not what I had planned to play, no one knows what I had planned to play. So something came out and you guys heard it and it was fine for everyone. Maybe not for me, so I have to put the work in afterwards to make it better next time for myself. But it was like that, just the knowledge that I knew, okay, it will sound okay in the audience, and I don't have to feel like one mistake ruins the gig, you know, and overcome this stage fright to play in front of others and with others and doing mistakes, you know. So that definitely helped.
That makes a ton of sense. One of the things that I was trying to remind myself of when I was preparing for a mini clinic tour, by which I mean 2 clinics last fall, was this idea that, you know, I don't know if this is 100% true, but I think it's directionally true, that nobody in the audience cares if you don't execute something technically perfectly. They care about if you're boring, or if you're self-conscious, or if it feels like there's a wall up where you're not sharing your entire vibe. So the self-talk I would always have before I went on stage was just like, don't be boring.
What does it mean for you? Don't be boring.
I don't know. I guess just make mistakes from taking risks, right? So it's like, if I'm going to make a mistake, do it because I took a risk, and to sort of favor action. And sometimes I'll even feel like in a performance, like if it's a band, that's a little different, right? Because you sort of blend in. But just for instance, like a Minel video shoot or something like that, where like you're the featured artist. It's like, well, okay, like try something ballsy the first couple of minutes, or just like take a risk, go for something. Like not something unmusical, and not something where I'm trying to superimpose a lick that doesn't belong, but it's like, sometimes I'll be playing along and I'll feel inspired to like throw something out there. And I want to try to favor saying yes to that instinct, like even if it fails, and usually it won't. And then if I pull that off, or even if I don't completely pull it off, I sort of like reassure myself that I can take that risk, and then it sort of breaks the ice a little bit. And I think maybe that's maybe that's more necessary for me because I have less like recent playing experience in high stakes situations. I think if I'd been gigging like every single week for the last 10 years, it would be less necessary. But those are some of the things I think about.
That's great to hear. Because I think also like taking a risk, especially in a clinic situation, is the fun part. Because it's just a clinic. It's not a big gig where you have to try to keep the job, and do a good job serving the music and the artist you're playing with. It's just a clinic. And for me, it turned into exactly that, what you described, from a point where I thought, it has to be perfect. It has to be exactly like in the videos. Each stroke, I have to play the song exactly like this. People expecting this. Like in the past, in the first couple of years, I thought like this. My mindset was like this. And then like one stroke I've missed, the gig was ruined. The clinic was ruined. Performance was shit. I could not take it from the audience when they said, I had a great playing. I almost like I wanted to go home, And nowadays it's more like having fun with the guys in the audience and just taking a risk wherever you can to make it also joyful for yourself. And if you enjoy doing it, you transfer the emotion, everyone enjoys it. It's the same with when you play a gig. So I might take less risks, but I try to have as much fun as I can and enjoy stuff as much as I can, because like be not boring also means to me like transfer something, like transfer like an emotion. Music is emotion, doesn't matter if it's metal and you get like aggression going on and screaming out whatever annoys you, or is it like a singer-songwriter thing and it's a completely different emotion, but it's like transferring something to the audience is key to keep them with you. So
completely.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure to ask you about band leading before we're out of time, because it seems like you've put a lot of effort into your own projects and into writing. So I'm curious just how high a priority is that compared to playing other people's music?
It has been high priority before Jeff called. Then I let it slide a little bit also to enjoy like the time on the road with the guys and playing with him, of course. And now it's back on priority, but I'm still playing shows with other artists. So I try to get a bit more balance, because I do that fusion kind of music for so long now that I also need to have different things going on to, I also enjoy to just play the backbeat for 2 hours. So I can really, really enjoy that a lot. And it's more like the mix of different styles and different artists, and you get inspired also for your own music again in a different way. So it's priority, but it is less priority than it has been before Jeff.
That makes sense. Well, what's one big lesson you've learned, a big insight you've had as a result of playing with Jeff?
Even more, it's all about the emotion. Forget about the technique and the music theory. When you are on stage, it's about pure emotion. Awesome.
Well, I want to ask about one other practice-related thing, because I had two in my mind when we were talking about the practice room stuff. So one was improvisation, and I think, you really expanded on that in an interesting way. The other was time and subdivision, because when I watch you play, I feel like one thing that comes through, in particular in some of those lo-fi videos you'll shoot in the practice room with a smartphone or something like that. I think those are so great to watch on Instagram just because they control for production quality. So it's like, we're not hearing you through professional mics and like a great mix. We're just hearing you with the iPhone there. But still, like, you can hear the power, the touch, and the subdivision. I'm curious how much did you need to work on time and subdivision as its own thing compared to it just sort of improved on its own?
A lot. Really, really, really a lot, especially as I started with getting into this fives as an own world, not in a 5/8 or 5/4 setting where it's maybe more natural to play that stuff. That was like a huge thing. The 7 were also hard to do as an own thing, you know. And the 7 is still hard to do when it comes to coordination and trying to do the same things like what you do with 4/4 time. That's always my goal. I want to be like as fluid and safe in timing, and as like fluid in improvisation in that subdivisions like I am with 4/4 time, or in 16th notes and 30 seconds and whatever. And it's still challenging. And it's I had to work a lot on timing in 5s and 7s for sure.
What would you say to a student who's like, I just discovered that my timing and subdivision is total crap. Like I can play my coordinations okay, but my beat's super wobbly. When I play fills, like the time's migrating all over the place. What would you recommend to them as like a first step?
I would say just step back a little bit. I mean, you can play fancy things, but when it sounds like wacky and crappy and wobbly, then doesn't do the work, you know. So I always actually study with my students, which are also really good in university, you know. We always step back on some point to the really basics and check back if it's really working in each different situation. And usually it's not the case. Usually you always find something which is not working in a slow tempo or in a really simple setting. And from there we coming back again to the more complex stuff. Definitely step back.
So it's a matter sort of zooming in and isolating.
Yeah. You know, Jojo Meyer explained it really well once. He said, if you want to grow, you always go like one step further, and then there is a step where you cannot go further because something is not working. So you have to do the research. Which step was it where you did the mistake, or where you did not work it out properly in detail? And you have to figure it out, and then you have to step back here before you can come up here and go further. So this is a really nice explanation for what's actually happening in this whole practicing and getting better and developing process.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, in what capacity do you utilize the metronome and encourage people to utilize the metronome versus when is it appropriate to turn it off?
I mean, there are specific things you practice with a metronome, like the micro time and stuff in first place. But then you also practice. I'm a big fan of counting out loud in different ways. Not just 1, 2, 3, 4, also counting patterns and rhythms, and trying to play and improvise over that, which builds this kind of headspace. And as I started doing this, I felt my timing got way better, you know, because I gave myself kind of a pulse, which is not coming from a different sound source. And I was focused way more on it, because we all know when we practice along a metronome, at some point you don't hear it anymore, you know, or you just hear it when you want to hear it. And then it's happening that you are not precise with the metronome, because it's just like a sound source which is different. And when you do the counting yourself, maybe along with metronome, okay, but then it's a complete different thing. You have to be focused more, and you lock in with yourself more. And so I always say, put the metronome off, let's count. They hate it, of course. But it's an important skill.
Yeah, that's something I haven't tried as much. Like I think we were trying to solve a similar problem in terms of losing track of the metronome because it's no longer novel to you, right? So that's the thing that if you just have the click on the 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll just hear people like play with the click audible and they're just not burying it at all. And it's almost like an alarm, a smoke alarm going off in the background that you just ignore because it's just kind of been absorbed into the background. So like I was always looking for ways to make it salient, to make it novel to me. And yeah, counting out loud seems like another good way to do that. Pivoting to teaching, what's your favorite thing about teaching?
The favorite thing, I would say, it's like two things. First off, it's always a take and give. Like it's like a thing that I learn a lot from my students as well in different ways. And it's also, I like to share what my path was in terms of how to study something, because I wished that I would have explained that I would have had some teachers who had explained a couple of things in a way that I really understand it quick. And I try to break down things for my students like in a really quick and super basic way so that they can just move on really quick. So I had to figure out a lot of stuff myself, which took a lot of time, So, and another thing is that when I have to explain things and break it down, I often understood stuff way better than before for myself. Sometimes you don't make thoughts because when you get a question from a student and you think, I never thought about this. And then you have to watch and check and explain it. And that way you really keep track of how you do things and also realize, hey, maybe it's crap. Maybe I should change that. Or maybe, this is the thing. Okay. So this is for me teaching also, It's fun, actually. I like it.
Same. I'm curious if you have an example that comes to mind of some kind of concept like that, where the understanding you had in your head wasn't explained to you like in the best way, and that through thinking through it, you came up with like a more concise or, in your mind, more useful way to explain it.
Actually, I struggled for a while back in the days to get the difference between a grouping and a group of 5 or a subdivision of 5, or what is it actually, or a triplet and a group of 3. And so for me, it was not clear, like explained, like really back in the days, where I was not in music theory at all. So I was confused and often mixed things up. And also the terms you hear out there in YouTube and in social media is still often mixed up. It's still just wrong what you hear. And, I had that for myself in the past, and I try to, explain that to my students in a simple way so that they understand it quickly. And I also think that it's like, there are so many lessons out there on YouTube, but there's also so many wrong things explained where I think, okay, it's still, with all that lessons out there, it's still important to have a teacher, like a private teacher, at least here and there, to really break down things and like have a serious lesson, to get stuff right, especially when you start off playing drums.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's the more that I teach, the more I arrive there. And that's slightly unfortunate for my career plans. But actually privately, I'm sort of retooling things to be able to teach like in a more intensive way with fewer students. Anyway, this has been fascinating. I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm really glad we made it happen. Before I let you go, where would you send people to check out what you've got going on?
Actually, definitely my website, anikanilles.com, because everything is there. Tour dates are there. music is there, videos are there. I have a web shop where you get transcriptions and play-alongs and other stuff. Exactly. So my website is the way to go.
Can people access this handout that you've been speaking about there?
No, that's still my personal one. But I share okay. Exercises and free loops and stuff along with some videos on my website as well. So free material.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a lot of fun. Really, really appreciate your time. Appreciate you sharing your insights. Hope we get to do it again at some point. But I think the people are really going to dig your thoughts on this stuff. So really, really fantastic speaking. And speak to you soon, hopefully.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Take care.